Welcome to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast where innovation isn't just an ideal, it's a way of life. I'm your host and creator of the Innovate, Disrupt, or Die newsletter, Danny Nathan. Hello, folks, and welcome back to another episode of Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. This week I have Rebecca Pinn with me. Rebecca, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's dive right in, Rebecca. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you're excited about the innovation space.
Yeah. My name is Rebecca Pinn. I am Director of Innovation Consulting at EPAM. But everyone asks, how do you get into innovation? Because there's no degree in that. You know, long time ago at this point, was a mechanical engineer undergrad and did that the kind of way most women do, which is you're good at math and you like building things. And my dad's like, you're an engineer. Did that for a few years. Wasn't really liking it. It was very low volume. I was in the aircraft industry and I was doing a very low volume work. I always imagined I'd walk into what was Bed Bath & Beyond and see products I designed on walls. So I went back to grad school for a master's in product development. And it really clicked when I was in grad school that companies don't know what to make next. I was very naive in assuming that all these companies have these infinite roadmaps and it's just a question of getting to it. And in grad school, I really learned, maybe I was naive, but I learned they don't know what to do next. They're usually, they know how to incrementally innovate, which is, hey, we released this product in black, let's make it in green. But it's not necessarily what is this brand new product line? So after grad school, I worked as a design researcher at a small product design firm, and I really fell in love with that. Our clients would come to us and say, we want to design this thing, this new X, this new Y. What is the best X or Y we could make? So I went out and did the research and went back to the industrial designers, and I said, here's the requirements, here are the key insights. And that was a lot of fun. And then my boss sat me down one day and he said, you're not really a researcher. And he said it in a loving way, but he was saying, you do enough research to figure out what to do next with it. He said, you're really a strategist. And looking back, I think what he meant was you look to figure out what are the insights, what are the big opportunities, what are things our clients can act on, and how do we make that into a new product, service, experience, whatever it might be. So I think I hit my 11-year anniversary actually here at what was Continuum Innovation that got acquired by EPAM, and I've been doing that ever since. So I feel very lucky because it's a really awesome job. I always had wanted to work for Continuum, it was very exciting. You have those few companies, you're like, I'd love to work for them. And then when you get to, and then not only do you get to, but it's worked out so well. I feel very fortunate,
That's fantastic.
So, yeah.
All right. Question for you. You mentioned that you were dissatisfied in your aircraft engineering role because it was low volume. Were you just not churning out enough airplanes or what does that mean?
Sorry, to describe it well. It's, it was a lot of save as. So someone at some point designed the galley or the bathroom. And then a new airline said, hey, it was aircraft interiors, I should say. I wasn't doing, so it was the interiors. And they'd say, okay, this new airline, Singapore Airlines, whatever it might be, wants this new iteration of the bathroom, and here's their requirements. So you make the changes. I was on the second floor working in CAD, and then you go down to the first floor. The coolest part, and what I do miss about engineering, is you get to see the thing you made. Mm-hmm. And if there was an issue, they'd fix it on the spot. And so it wasn't like you're doing lots of prototyping. So when you think about the world of a lot of the products and services that, I'm in now, you do tons of prototyping. You don't just release something, but this was a very low volume industry. And it was sort of like I said, a save as, and then even then it was we'll fix it on the spot, make the changes that we need to in the drawing. So the next version of it, they're not making thousands and thousands of the same bathroom. It's 10 maybe. So that's what I meant by low volume versus I think about now whenever we're designing anything, it's how do we make this at scale and all the prototyping needed.
Got it.
It was a very long time ago. I feel like
do I get to blame you for my continuing limitations of legroom when I fly places? Or was that somebody else?
I was doing bathrooms and closets. So you can blame me for the bathroom sizes, but I will say it was a noted joke that these are, we made a prototype once in our office of the square footage, the floor space we had. Yeah. And we're how does anyone fit in here? So
interesting.
But, they're trying to get as many people on as possible. So yeah.
Yes, we all know. We all know, because now we're all sitting on top of one another. So,
Yes.
well, I appreciate your sharing your background. Next question. You mentioned something during our intro call that I want to kind of come back to. You said that one of the things that really interests you about the innovation space, especially lately, is the speed at which change is happening. Tell me a little bit about why that's exciting, where you're seeing some of the most exciting change, and where you think what does it mean for the future of innovation given the pace that we're trying to keep up with already today?
Yeah. And apologies if I go on a bit of a rant, but
No, please
I
do.
think about pre-digital, like when things were very physical and service oriented, there was a very clear cadence of how development worked. And
Hmm.
so you have the development cycle, you'd like do your research, find the opportunities, you'd start building some prototypes, you'd go into building an alpha model, then a beta model, you release a version. And then maybe a year later, or depending on the cycle, you'd iterate on that version. And it was very much like how the physical product development world works, and to a certain extent does today. And then I think about, okay, over the last, 20, 25 years, the rise of digital. And that is a totally different life cycle.
Yeah.
And you have all these companies who were in this sort of product service oriented world, now all of a sudden in this digital world where the cycle is happening fast, right? It's happening much faster. It's not happening yearly. People are expecting monthly updates.
Hmm.
And that has only gotten way more accelerated in the last few years with AI, because now not only, it used to be the limitation was the people who could code this. And now
Right.
everyone can code this. And now everyone can bring any idea to life. And so you have a cycle that wasn't that long ago. We're talking like 35, 40 years ago of how products and services came to market. Then you had digital. And frankly, if COVID didn't happen, I think a lot of companies still would be struggling when it comes to digital transformation. What does it mean to be a
Hmm.
digital company? And now, maybe they're sort of getting over that hump. And now they're like, oh, now we have to deal with AI where it's even faster. And so
Right.
I think for a lot of clients, it's like, we just kind of figured out this digital thing. And now we have to figure out this AI thing. It's a lot. And also you can't do the AI thing without the digital piece.
Right.
So what I'm seeing is that our clients are having to go in a very short time period of how they manage bringing things to market, let alone new things to market. And the skills it requires. So that's all happening really, really fast. I think what's exciting about it is that you don't have to hold on to some legacy patterns. I think there's a
Hmm.
tendency to say we've made this thing X, let's make it digital. But that usually makes things like worse. Like, so I think about if you're, I'm not describing it well, but like if you just take a process, it's a manual process or an analog process and say, okay, we're going to digitize it, which is, and I should say digital, you just make it a digital thing, but it's the exact same process.
Yeah.
It's probably more annoying because writing is actually very fast. And it's like, but if you did truly digitize it, which is, okay, if we know we start at point A and we want to end at point B, and who cares the process in the middle, let's redo it. That's really exciting. That sort of like
Yes.
opens you up to we can really change things. How AI plays into that, who even knows? But I think everyone's getting up to speed. Anyone who claims they're an expert, I'm always like, we'll see. I should maybe be careful when I say that. So I think that it opens up a lot of excitement. I do think the really exciting thing about AI is like I said before, what used to stop people was we need someone who can make it, or we need someone who's able to make this real. And
Hmm.
that isn't a limiting factor anymore. If you have the idea, if you have the vision of what it could be, and you kind of the craft piece, which is kind of sad. I hate seeing any craft go away, but the ability to bring something to life now is really exciting. I think I'm not a developer, so I actually, from what I've read, you can't replace some of the thought that goes into like if we want to scale something, but just from a
Right.
prototyping perspective, the ability to like, I have a vision, let me bring it to life. That's going a lot faster, which I think is really exciting. And I work in PowerPoint a lot, but I know how powerful a demo is, how powerful a prototype is. And so the
Right.
faster we can put those in front of people, and yeah, we can have the PowerPoint in the background with like the business case and all that kind of fun stuff in the roadmap, but there's nothing like seeing is believing. So I think that's really exciting. But
Yes.
it is all happening so, so fast. And, you know, companies are trying to, it's not just moving like a single person, you're moving a whole organization into a new
Hmm.
direction, and people come in every day, they're working. And then all of a sudden it's like, you can't just change everything on a dime. And I'm very sympathetic to my clients. I recognize it's really hard to make change.
Yes. Yes, it is hard to make change. Rebecca, how much of your work today is focused on physical versus digital? Do you still do any physical product work, or are you mostly in sort of the digital transformation space?
I still sometimes am brought in to do physical, not often, but if we do med tech.
Okay.
So there's like always jokes of if they're running, like we have mechanical engineers here at EPAM and they're always like, oh, if we need someone, Rebecca can help out. I'm like, we will get fired if we bring me on board. But I still do from a physical product actually, I look back at my projects. I'd say I do like 3 or 4 projects a year. I'd say I do one every couple years. It's physical, but I'm mostly in service, which in part is digital.
hmm
So less the physical stuff, which I still miss. I love the tangible. Who doesn't?
Yes,
But
there is something about holding the thing that you've made that is just irreplaceable. I personally came very close to a second master's degree for exactly that reason. And then, long story short, ended up not doing so. But I totally get the draw.
I mean, even now when I'm doing research, I still like to make physical things for people. They're not like prototypes or anything, but like physical things people can play with or think with. I'm like, we need to have stimulus. So we need like the
Right.
physical thing. So as much as I can, I try to bring that into it. But a lot of it is, a lot of it's more service and digital oriented. But I think a big future, which I don't know if anyone's really cracked this nut yet, is like the physical digital merging of those two
Yeah.
things. I think we're seeing it with cars and how they're having to do that, and it's really hard to do that. Um, right now, there's still a big divide between the two, but I'm really curious where that industry goes because the car industry is on, I think, the forefront of like the physical digital merging together. And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting. And there's been a couple of products like the Humane AI pin and the Rabbit device that got a ton of hype, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years ago, and then just sort of fell apart and went quiet. That I think we're trying to create some sort of bridge between the physical and the digital worlds for people who are interested in using AI for that.
and
Uh,
it's hard because again, they're on different product development cycles. So how to
yes,
bring physical product to life is a totally different beast than bringing digital to life, and then having them align is really tough. I
right.
think, it's everyone sees like why, like my husband and I don't have a car, but we keep talking about buying one. And I'm like, well, it has to be the car that I'm envisioning we have. And I'm like, this doesn't exist yet. Like it just doesn't.
That's
Like
a good way to keep
I,
yourself from buying a car, I
I
guess.
know, yeah. It's like, but we'll see where it goes. I'm excited. It will happen. But I
Yes.
think again, it goes back to that fundamental issue of their development cycles are very different. What it takes to bring something to life in a digital world is very different from what it takes in the physical world. And then bringing them together and then having them update, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. This is a total tangent, Rebecca, but have you seen the vehicle company called Slate?
No. What?
So, in my opinion, since we're talking cars and I'm a little bit of a car nerd, this is one of the most interesting kind of car companies that I've seen come to life lately. They just came out, or I think sort of became publicly known within the last year or so. And I'll make a long story short, but basically the selling point is that it is I want to say $20,000 electric, like compact pickup truck, but it's only available in gray plastic body paneling, and then you can put a vinyl wrap on it. And there are no dealerships. They're building a network of certified mechanics that you can take your car to. And then more interestingly, their kind of default is, well, no, before you take it to the mechanic, go to the Slate University and we have how-tos on how to do all sorts of repairs and upgrades and things to your Slate vehicle. And then it's very modular. So they have like a hard shell and you can turn it into an SUV and you can add your second row of seats if you want, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I think it's really interesting that vehicle design, this is less in the physical digital space, but just more in terms of thinking about the future of vehicles. I find it really interesting that they are aiming down market with something that is sort of easy to get your hands dirty with and make your own. And I'm really interested to see
Very interesting.
whether
Yeah.
that proves successful for them.
Yeah. But I think we need disruptors in the market. I'm not a huge
I
car
agree.
person. I've done a lot of car projects, I think, now that I think about it. I've done a lot of like transportation oriented projects, but
Okay.
I think there's going to be interesting disruption in the space also, especially in the US because the price is getting so like it's just getting
Yeah.
so expensive to buy a car that something's
Yes.
going to come in and disrupt it at a much lower price point. Because
Yes. Well,
at the end of the
I
day,
agree, and I think that's part of why I find Slate so interesting. Is it's been so long since there's been a not even a $20,000 car, but a low end of the price spectrum vehicle that didn't feel like an Econo box that everybody looks at and goes, oh yeah, you paid $5,000 for the
yeah.
Econo box version. Sure, enjoy. So yeah, I think that's super interesting. What other types of projects have you been working on, Rebecca? And to the extent that you're ready,
Yeah.
willing, and able, names are great. But otherwise, you mentioned transportation and automotive. What other kind of areas do you focus on?
Yeah, I can't give any client names, but I do a
Okay.
lot of work in the healthcare space. So a lot of work with payers, a lot of work with providers, a lot of work with pharma. And mostly because when we think about places that need innovation and strategy, it's usually places that are incredibly, especially from a consulting perspective,
Hmm.
it's industries that are very complex. And healthcare, especially in the United States,
Oh,
is an
God.
incredibly complex beast. And
Yes.
there's so much opportunity there just to make, like, even like I mentioned before, like incremental innovation, the smallest changes could have a huge
Yeah.
impact on patients, on doctors, on nurses, on all the people. So I do about 2/3 of my work is around healthcare. Again, all the kind of stakeholders and players in the industry. And I'm always on the, like, how do we improve the patient and doctor experience? Just to be very clear, that's
Got it.
that's my job. How do we
Got it.
make
Not
how do
how do
we
we make insurance companies more money?
it's very much on how do we, like, even especially with, like, I think even patients, like, how do we help patients be more adherent? So it's like, how do we improve outcomes? How do we make doctors' lives easier, nurses' lives easier? How do we make this medical device comfortable to use, easy to use? So that's sort of my domain. And then the other third is other complex industries. So I said, a lot of, again, I keep coming back to the airline industry. I've done like a lot of like I said, transportation airline work, and then financial services a little bit. But the bulk
Yeah.
of it has been healthcare, which is really rewarding, because it's
Oh,
like,
nice.
because that, I think one of the hard parts about strategies, like I said, a lot of my work lives in decks, but those insights are evergreen. A lot of the things I'm telling clients, they last more than 1 quarter. They're
Yeah.
going to last a lot longer than that. And so I
Yes.
can
For
see
better or
those
worse,
insights.
those pains seem to be pervasive.
Yeah, so I can see, like, some of the things that they put out. I'm like, "Oh, they heard us, and maybe they implemented it in a different way." So it's very rewarding. And also, I still love doing interviews. I still love doing sort of the core basic work when it comes to human-centered design. So going out, interviewing people. I just came off a project. We were interviewing people with, like, high cost, complex conditions.
Hmm.
So thinking things like going through cancer, having rare disease, organ transplant. We talk to people who are on the remission side of it, but those are really rewarding interviews. They're
Yeah,
just like
I'd
hearing
imagine.
people, what they're going through, and how you can make their lives a little bit better. So it's just a very rewarding space.
That's fantastic. Awesome. During our intro call, Rebecca, you mentioned that, as we're talking about the speed of change, that in many cases it's almost too fast for some companies. And I think you've already hit on this a bit, but I want to sort of pointedly ask the question anyway. Can you elaborate on sort of what you mean by too fast and where you see that coming to life?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit before about, like, how those product life cycles are really
Yeah.
different. It's too fast. I think one of the hardest parts, especially again as someone who does a lot of strategy work, is it feels like we spend all this time, like 6 months, putting a strategy together. We're ready to implement it, and then things have already changed. There's a new
Yes.
app out. There's a new thing out. There's a new technology now. How do we incorporate it? So I think it's really hard because it takes our clients, it takes any large company a long time to get all their ducks in a row of, like, what's our 5-year vision? And then it feels like you have a 5-year vision, and for lack of a better term, you get, like, punched in the face by something else that comes out, and now you have to pivot. And so I think that's that speed part where it feels like even if we try, it's still gonna hit us in the face. We won't know what to do about it. Which to me says, like, well, do you have the right strategy then? Because the strategy is supposed to be technology agnostic. It's really meant to be like, what do you want to be in 5 years? What kind of
Right.
vision do you have? Which is maybe another conversation for another time. But so I think that's part of it, of why it's moving too fast. I think also you think about the employee base that people have, is that it's not just about what do we want to make? It's, do we have the capabilities and the talent to bring
Yes.
that to market? It's ideas are a dime a dozen. Like I always tell that to people. Like
Hmm.
people come up to me with my job, like, I have a great idea. I'm like, everyone has a great idea. It's
Yeah.
about implementing it and implementing it correctly. That's really the hard part. My clients never have a shortage of ideas. That's never an issue. It is always about what's the right idea and how do we bring that idea to market in the right way. And so when I think about everything moving too fast, maybe 5 years ago you had the right workforce to bring this idea to market. Is it still the right people? And how do
Right.
you make sure you have that capability and talent? How do you cultivate that internally? Um, and I think the last part is, I don't know if I have a last part, but those are
Yeah.
the big things I'm seeing moving too fast. I feel like I had another one, but maybe it'll come to me.
It'll come back to you. So then, on that note, Rebecca, what advice do you have either for other innovators, or I guess the other way to look at this question would be, how do you prepare your clients for the expectation that you've just described? The world is moving fast. We're planning on a 5-year schedule, but next month, something that we talked about as highly futuristic suddenly comes to bear and is out there in the world. How do you handle all of that with your clients and managing expectations? And how would you advise other people who are in the space to do so?
So I think it does go back to, maybe I said it was another conversation, but maybe it's this one, which is, I think it's actually understanding what a strategy is. And I think what I've noticed, a lot of people, when they put together a strategy, it's usually goals. Like, we're going to make X amount of money. And I'm like, that's not a
Yeah.
strategy. That's a goal.
Yeah.
So I think it's, what is the actual strategy? And it's, what is your vision? Agnostic of technology, agnostic of the embodiment of what you're trying to create. What is the vision of what you want to be in 5 years? What's the experience you're trying to create? Because and then you can figure out what are some near-term steps we can do. But then it's easy to course correct as new technology comes out, because that experience that you're trying to create, that vision, when we talk about a product and service standpoint, shouldn't fundamentally change. And it should be pretty ambitious. It should feel magical. It should
Right.
feel like as futuristic as you want it. And then you think about those near-term steps to get there. And then it's easier to course correct when new technology comes out, because you can say, oh, we can, like, that vision we had, this technology applies really well. Or, hey, that technology that's coming out, I don't really see how it applies here. This comes a lot with AI, of people wanting to use AI and have these fancy AI features. And we're like, okay, but do you have the fundamental data you need to build those LLMs that are going to power that AI? Let's have that conversation. If we do, like,
Right.
so I think, to me, it's like really understanding what a vision is and the strategy to get there, and recognizing that the technology might change, and that's okay. And it's easy for you to course correct and decide what's in and what's out, because a good strategy tells you what you should and shouldn't do. Fundamentally, it should say,
Right.
we're going this direction, or we're not going in this direction, and this is in and this is out. And the danger a lot of big companies have is, when they don't have a strong strategy, is they want to say yes to everything. And then they just, distribute all their resources to the point it dilutes everything. And
Right.
that becomes really dangerous.
So if I could parrot that back for a moment, what I'm hearing, Rebecca, is you're talking about the need to ground future vision in business goals beyond the obvious of, as you said, we're here to make money, for example. But what is our vision? Why do we exist as a business? What do we want to deliver to people? And then the rest of it sort of fits underneath as the how. And if I'm understanding correctly, and I think I agree,
You're phrasing it much better than I am, by the way. So thank
well,
you.
it's much easier when you've already said it and all I have to do is go, oh, okay, so you mean this.
Well, I think with technology, people get very, very excited about new technology, and they say,
Yes.
we need, and I think I always tell this, especially when I'm giving, like, tours in the office or talking to students about my job, is I said, 15 years ago, every single client said, we need an app. And I'm like, why? Like, that's a way of implementing an idea, but, like, why do you need an app? Which usually
Right.
they didn't. And now I'm getting, oh, we need to use AI. And it's like, why? So I think
Mhm.
people get very excited by the technology, but it's really all about, how can technology enable what we're trying to do? And if you have a really, like you said, or like you said, what I said, a clear vision of what you're trying to achieve, it makes it so much easier to decide if that technology is right for you. Because,
Right.
and not to say that I always think it's also really important that clients continually build capabilities, because they might want to use a new technology or have that skill. So it's always important to, as new technologies emerge, even if they don't have an immediate use, build that muscle. But that doesn't mean you need to, be like, we're 100% investing in this. It's really about, that's more exploration to, keep the capability muscle. I think people get so lost in the excitement of technology. I think that comes from kind of Silicon Valley
Yeah.
esque stuff. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yes, the rise of
And
startups and entrepreneurs.
and they get really excited, and it's like, okay, but what is it in service of? What is it
Right.
enabling? What is it allowing? And I think those are the important questions to ask, as opposed to, isn't this cool and new? Like, there's a lot of cool and new things, but like,
Yeah.
how is it helping people, and how is it making their lives better and easier?
So, as you're working with clients, Rebecca, when they come to you, help me understand a little bit more. What is the ask usually when a client comes to you? And, I always talk about innovation as one of those terms that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Somebody says, we need to be innovative or we need innovation. And everybody starts nodding because everybody agrees innovation is good. But then when you start sort of digging into it, you figure out that everybody's talking about slightly different things. So when your clients come to you, help me understand a little bit about what they tend to ask for, and then what does that ultimately tend to uncover?
Yeah. So I'd say there's three types of ask. The first ask is, we want to make a thing. And it's like the broadest thing. There was one where they basically said, we want to make a training game. But they had no like, it was for a complex industry situation. And they basically wanted to make a training, and they're like, let's gamify it. But they had no idea, like, what does that even mean? How do we, like, what are the
Yeah.
details of it? It was just sort of like a very big concept that they got buy-in for. And it wasn't the wrong concept. I'm not diminishing that, but there's a lot between, like we said before, the idea and the
Hmm.
implementation of the idea. So that's one kind of ask, where there's sort of this broad, like, we want to do this thing in this space, but we have no idea what that really entails. The other ask, which is the one I typically get the most of, is a client says, we want to enter this market.
Hmm.
We have no idea how. Like, what product or service do we need to build or create to enter this market and be competitive in it? Those are the more kind of stereotypical innovation asks, where you see everyone post-it noting or digital post-it noting now. But those are the ones where we're really going out to markets our client doesn't really understand, and saying, okay, how do we help you enter this market, in this industry and whatnot. That's the second ask. That's usually like the big one that I think we're known for. And then the other one that happens in cycles, I would say, and again, it sort of goes back to the conversation around things moving quickly and new
Yeah.
technology, is clients saying, hey, we want to build our innovation capability. So help us figure out how, instead of having to come to you every single time, we can build this in-house. What does that look like? And it's been really interesting over the course of my career, kind of seeing how innovation capabilities have like ebbed and flowed, how it was
Yeah.
like, let's have an innovation. Like, I feel like it was 10 years ago, everyone had an innovation center, and that kind of went out of style. And now it's coming back of, okay, how do we have innovation be this like layer throughout? So
Right.
that's the other one, which is, how do we build innovation within our organization? Because I think there's always going to be a need for outside perspective and consultants, whatever you want to call it. But also, I totally get why clients say we should be able to do this in-house to a certain extent.
Hmm.
We should be able to do that. And it's important that they're able to. So how do we build that? Because sometimes they don't have that in-house. They don't have that. They don't have the people. They don't have the process. They don't have this like sense of like, where do we start? So that's the third ask we get a lot of.
Got it. Do you have a favorite amongst the three? Like, which, if you had to choose, if somebody said to you, all right, you can pick your next project, but it's going to be in bucket 1, 2, or 3. Do you have a preference?
It really depends. So I will say, for a while, it was the second one I mentioned, which was like the typical white space, like, under this market. But I joke with my boss. I'm like, after 10 years of making discussion guides, maybe I don't want to do this
Yeah.
project again. I love it, but it's like, you kind of want to break. So that being said, after I haven't really been on one of those until recently. And so it was the first one in like a couple of years I've been on just now, that I talked about with the patient, when I was interviewing patients. And I'm like, oh, I forgot how much I missed this. So like,
Nice.
but so that goes ebbs and flows. I am a big nerd when it comes to like design strategy and innovation strategy. So I really love the idea of, how do we take what feels like a really difficult and ambiguous process that feels kind of magical from the outside, and be like, no, there's a way to do this. You have to change it for every company. So those projects are really fun, because it's sort of, there's the 80% of how innovation, and I use human-centered design, how human-centered design works, how it can create and cultivate new ideas. And then there's something really fun and nerdy about, like, let's make a playbook, and like, what are the steps to it? And like, what are you
Hmm.
looking for at each step? I'm like always doing internal knowledge management stuff. I'm always like, how do we codify this? That's really fun. The first category I mentioned, which is a client has an idea already, that really depends on the idea. So the one that I mentioned about the training game, like, is one of my favorite projects ever. But
Oh,
if
wow.
maybe it
Interesting.
was I learned so much on that project. It was a project where I went through into like more of the digital implementation, and I learned so much. It was such a big, diverse team. Because a lot of innovation projects are typically teams of 3 to 5 people, which
Hmm.
is great. And so that project was, I think, 25 people.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so just very different. I learned so much on it. So, um, but I could imagine if it was sort of a different topic or a different idea, I might feel a little different, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean. But
Sure.
so yeah, I think that that's sort of my. I don't think I ranked them, but kind of how I feel about all of them. But um, again, I feel very lucky with my job. This is always a really fun job. You're always
Yeah.
learning a ton, and you always find something you love on a project. And I do a lot of B2B work, which I think on paper seems really dry, and I always find tons of things to nerd out on. I'm sure
Oh, yeah.
I bother my husband at dinner all the time when I'm like, "We're learning about this," and he's like, "Who cares?" But it's so easy to find stuff to get excited and nerd out on. And
Yeah.
when I'm talking to students about like why I love my job is I think if you want to be in the innovation space, you have to just be constantly wanting to learn and be it, always curious, like always ask, it's always asking why, but like you get deeply invested in nerding out on these things. And um, it's hard not to get excited, even on seemingly dry topics. The
Yeah.
funny part is I'm never on like, for lack of a better term, like the really sexy projects. I'm never on the stuff that's like super B2C and that's like super consumer facing. I'm like never on that stuff. I'm always on the B2B stuff, um, which I still love, but I always think it's funny.
Nice. Rebecca, you talked at one point, I think it was during our intro call, about helping companies learn how to sort of flex their innovation muscle. And it sounds like that aligns closely to the third category that you're describing. How do we ingrain innovation internally? Can you talk to me a little bit more about how you go about helping companies sort of learn to do that? And what are some of the shortcomings that you tend to see that companies have to overcome again and again?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to building innovation muscle, I think it's first acknowledgement that innovation is very different than how you run your day to day. And I
Yes.
think it's very difficult for companies to recognize you're going to need a second way of working. I think everyone can say yes on paper, but then to actually have that happen is very different. So with
Yes.
innovation, you just need a second way of working. So typically I find with clients that they always have like, whether it's a stage gate process, whether it's certain committees that meet to approve things, we always tell them, okay, if you're really going to do innovation, you're going to need a separate process that works outside of that. We can still put stage gates, we can still put milestones in there, but you need to accept it's going to be very different. And the information you're getting is going to be probably not as complete as you're used to. It's going to be very incomplete because that's how innovation works. You
Right.
start with this sort of nascent thought, idea, insight, and then it kind of grows from there, which is really fun because it's us being like, well, what should you expect? And what does good look like at this stage? So that's sort of like the first piece is that creating that second way of working. And then, again, I'm very sympathetic to my clients. Like they're set up to be running these like P&Ls and departments where like they have things coming out. Like I said, they're really good at like, we release something black. How do we put it in green? How do
Yeah.
we do a different size? And to do something brand new, I think it's very easy and naive for people to come from the outside and say, well, why wouldn't you do that? But at the same time, if you're inside a company, I get it. It's really risky to put yourself out there and say, I'm betting my career on this new idea. And I get why people wouldn't do it. How do I say this like in the nicest way possible? People generally work to earn money and they don't want to maybe risk that position.
Yeah.
Like I get that. And so innovation in of itself is risky, not just for the company, but as an individual. And so a lot of what we try to do, I try to think about with innovate, like building innovation muscles is really around how do we de-risk that process and de-risk that for the people who have to put some skin in the game where they still
Yes.
can get some credit. They can still get kudos, even if an idea fails, because they will. Not every idea, even if everything's going right, it seems like the great idea, the research is there. Sometimes things just don't work out,
Mhm.
but we shouldn't punish people for that. We should be like, great, we learned a lot. What worked, what didn't? How do we take that to the next thing we're going to do? But the way companies are set up, they're not, like I said, with that second wave, they're not set up for that. They're set up for here's what we earned last year. Here's what we think this should earn next year.
Right.
Great. And it's really hard to be like, a blank slate and say, okay, we need 5 ideas that are going to each earn $100 million. It's like, based off of what? I think, again, it's developing that second way of working. but it's really fun because it's fun, and it's fun to expose people to new ways of working and getting leadership bought into it. I mean, leadership always gets really excited by innovation, but getting them bought into this idea of there's going to be a second way of working, and we'll put the rules around it and the process around it, but we need you to be okaying that and be like, and so that's important. And then I think the other thing that I learned later in my career was people are really bad at saying no or stopping things to a certain extent. Like, it's easy to say no if it doesn't exist. It's easy to be like, we're not doing that because no money has been invested. But the second like a dollar has been invested in something, no one wants to pull the plug. No one wants to say no. And so I think it's having the discipline also of when to invest and take that risk. And then also outlining it's time to pull the plug. Like, this isn't working. Let's pull back, because it feels like a failure. And people, there's like the sunk cost fallacy. Like, and so I think creating that discipline within companies that like, it's okay that not everything moves forward. Not everything is $1 billion idea, but it's not about having this process is about finding the $1 billion idea. And there's going to be some failures along the way. And those aren't failures. Those, I shouldn't call them, they're learnings. They're like, that's how we figure out what's right.
Yes.
So those are the things we're really working with clients on. Because at the end of the day, like, yes, I'm nerding out on making a playbook for them and the process and all that, but it's really about the culture change that needs to occur. And you need that to happen top down. You need leadership to buy in, to giving people the permission, but you need a bottom up where people are excited about it. Like, you need people to want to participate. So it needs to happen at both levels. I think the hardest is when it's like this top-down mandate and everyone's like, I have a day job. And they're also expecting you to do innovation in like Friday afternoons. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like, it's a full-time job. You need a team working on this. And then you can bring people in at different points. Or when it's bottom up only and you have people who like have ideas, they want to make prototypes, they want to bring them to life, and they're just not given the time or bandwidth to do it. So those are sort of the things where it's like uncovering the truths of innovation and helping clients figure out, okay, based on your organization, what's the best way to set this up that works with your culture, but pushes the culture. Those are really fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've hit on something that I definitely want to circle back to in a minute, which is culture. But before I get to that, Rebecca, how do you encourage stakeholders, and particularly sort of the folks at the top of the pile, to understand that learning and failure go hand in hand, and that without taking the opportunity to fail so that you can learn, you're not going to get beyond the let's take the thing that was good in black and make it green kind of moment and into the what is the next change the world type of moment for our company. And I use change the world loosely. I mean, not every company is out there to, instill world peace or end hunger or whatever it is. Changing the world for some companies is, I don't know, a new app or whatever.
Yeah. I think setting expectations like I said before, at the milestones. I think, like I said before, people really overvalue ideas. And I'm like, you can have 1,000 ideas. Who cares? So I think it's really setting expectations of, hey, we're going to start off in 10 prompts of areas we want to explore. And from those 10 prompts, we're going to explore all of those. And then from there, we have to narrow down to the 3 we want to explore further of, hey, let's do some like, what's the opportunity here? So we have these 10 prompts. I think there's something interesting going on, whether it could be a trend, whether it could be a technology. Then we have to narrow it down. From there, it's like, okay, what's the actual like opportunity, which is the intersection of the consumer problem and our business challenge? Like, what's there? Then we can say, okay, what are some of the ideas? And then you start getting into that prototyping cycle, and you can really easily make some criteria. Once things start getting tangible, people are, I think, better about pulling the plug is not the right word, but they're better about like what's working, not working. The pulling the plug is still hard because they want to keep investing in it. It's like at some point. But I think it's laying out what that journey, that funnel looks like. And then, what I like to really do is at all those milestones have really clear criteria you should be expecting. So at an early stage where you're figuring out, is there an opportunity here? Is there something we want to invest in? It's not necessarily about like, do we have a working prototype? That's not really it. It's like, is there a market here? Is there an unmet need in the market? Is there a market here? Is there an unmet consumer need that we feel we're positioned to help with? So I think setting that up. So that's what we try to do, but it's really hard because, and I'm still working on this. Like, I like to think I still have a lot of my career left and I still need to do this. I think everyone feels, especially if they've been successful in their career. It sounds really weird, but like, I know what I'm doing. I've been successful thus far. Like, why should I take more advice?
Yeah.
So I think it's the nudging of this is going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. But yeah, it's I don't know if I have the magical answer to give to someone very high up in executive leadership of like what the right expectations are. What we always try to do is say, if something's not working, if something's failing, it's not about a failure. It's about what's the return on learning. How can we use this to later invest? Um, and I just thought of a great story my client, or not client, my coworker told me, which is the ultimate story of return on learning is when Apple went to Corning and said, hey, we need new glass for our iPhone. And we need
Mhm.
it so that if it drops, like it won't break. And they said, yeah, we can get that to you in 6 months. And the only reason they could do that in 6 months was because they're like, I did this project 20 plus years ago and it didn't work out. It was for, I think, a car company. It didn't work out, but I documented everything from it. We have the technology and we
Yes.
basically packaged it. So if we need it later, we could pull it off the shelf and bring it to life. And I think that's the kind of powerful story of like, it didn't work in that context at that time, but you always want to leave a project that maybe didn't get to market, or even it went on market and then it didn't succeed. Say, what did we learn from this? Are there
Right.
things we can take from it? How do we package that in a way that the next project we can pull from it? But it's really hard. I mean, people in leadership are being asked to, especially for public companies, like make more money, not to be
Hmm.
hyper capitalistic about it, but like that's their mandate. And so they're trying to be patient on one hand, but also they're a little impatient and understandably from the pressures that they're facing.
Sure. Yeah. The outside pressure to show quarterly returns every 3 months is pervasive without question. Awesome. Last sort of big question before we wrap up here, Rebecca. I want to circle back to the idea of culture. And for anybody who listens to me on this podcast often, I talk a lot about building a culture of innovation. You've hinted at it pretty thoroughly. What does that mean to you, and how do you encourage organizations not only to build it, but to understand what it means for them?
Yeah. So I think the first one is giving people a place that's safe to share what they're
Yes.
thinking. I think um, I've worked with clients where it's a lot of like nodding along, and that's not always the best for when you need innovation. You need like a dynamic where people can challenge each other and there not
Yes.
be a weird seniority dynamic going on. So I think creating a space, like not to be like, I don't know the right word, but like a safe space about it, but
Yeah.
having a culture where it's okay to challenge things. It's okay to bring things up that may or may not work out, but it's a thought. And it's not being challenging for the sake of being challenging and constantly holding things up. It is have we tried it this way? Are there other ways we can do these things? So I think it's in creating that space for people. I think it's also, like I said before, having a realistic expectation of the time and energy it takes to innovate. And so when clients, I think they always look to, I think Google had the 20% rule. I
Yeah.
think 3M had the 10% rule. I think that really misled a lot of people to how innovation happens, which is it's a thing that happens 4 hours weekly, where if we give everyone Friday afternoons, they'll innovate and it'll be great and we'll come up with the next $1 billion idea. And what we really try to tell our clients is innovation requires discipline and it requires people and energy and time. And we're not saying every single one of your employees needs to do it. And we're not saying it's they're in, they're out. It's usually you have a core team. So the way we work, like I said, 3 to 5 people, you have a core team that's what they're focused on. But then you have key milestone meetings. Like that's when you have a good workshop. That's when you have a big share out where you bring in other stakeholders who have a strong point of view, who have an opinion into that safe space where you're showing them what was learned and then start pushing on whether it's the insights or the ideas. But that to me is about creating the culture of like giving some people like maybe more time than you expected, but also knowing when to bring people in and making that a space safe where they can share their ideas, push their ideas, give their thoughts. I think they feel like there's a cool kids club situation where like,
Yeah.
I think what used to be innovation centers and they're sort of like, hey, this isn't working, where it was it's some weirdos playing with post-its in a room, and then there's everyone else who's running the business. And what you really need to have happen is you need still a couple weirdos maybe in a room, but how do we bring in all these different voices and give them an opportunity to speak, and give them an opportunity to give input, and then they can incorporate that, have the time, like they'll have the time, and then like keeping that pattern up. So when I think, so the culture of innovation is like and also it's the right people, I think. And then it's that some people are more strategic, some people are more tactical, and you kind of need all types when you're innovating. Um, you know, sometimes people are like, your team's too pie in the sky. And I'm like, but that's why we have some of your key team members coming in who like,
Right.
I know when rubber hits the road, the problems we're going to face. That's when you need those different voices coming in. So like I said before, it's how do we set up a process? How do we set up the right milestones, that right cadence? But it's tough. Like if your business is working in one direction and you're like, hey, we need to start making changes, like culture change is the hardest thing ever. It's very, very hard to do. It's very hard to maintain. And there's a reason why some companies, the way that they innovate is that they acquire.
Mm-hmm.
They've sort of were like, hey, this is really hard. This other person did something really cool. We'll just acquire it. But really, I think the brands and companies that people really respect are the ones where you're like, oh, they do it in-house. Now, what in-house means is sort of unclear, but it feels like that brand is bringing it to life.
Right.
And then people get excited. That's what makes those launches really exciting. It sort of becomes that flywheel. And I'm fine being like a hidden partner for my clients. I have no issue doing that. But I think it's really exciting seeing it build in-house and whatnot. But it's hard. It's really, really tough.
That is a constant through line in all of the conversations that I have. When it comes down to it, innovation is hard.
Yeah.
So,
and I think people are just, sorry for my last, like, they're just generally uncomfortable with the ambiguity of it. Like, I come in day one, I don't have the answer to I don't have the answer. I don't know I don't know how many ideas I'll come up with. We just sort of were like, trust us. Right. That's really hard. That's really hard to ask people to just come along for a journey. And some people are game and some people are super skeptical. And by the end, usually it goes very well. But that's hard. That's all really hard.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Rebecca, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and ideas here. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that either you're dying to share or that would add a really nice sort of cap to our conversation here?
I feel like I was a little doom and gloom at the end. Innovation is super fun. Like I think the reason companies need to do it is that it's what keeps employees engaged. It's what keeps them really excited. It's people, I think that's like when people leave, they're looking for something new and interesting. It's a way to engage people, and it's a way to kind of get people to escape from their day to day. And there's a way to do that for all your employees. So yes, it's really hard, but the reward is not just the making money or the new product release. The reward is like you keep really great employees engaged and like how you keep them. So that's to me what's always really important, because my favorite days at work are the big workshops we have where we have 20, 30 clients coming in and like they're like, this was so fun and rewarding. I'm so glad I came here. Like that, those are the best days.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Rebecca, where can people find you if they want to get in touch, pick your brain, possibly hire you and the EPAM team? What's the best place to find you?
Probably on LinkedIn. I don't know if there are that many Rebecca Pinns, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one with like really curly hair.
I'll make sure that that a link to your LinkedIn shows up underneath the video when we publish. Yeah. Awesome. Again, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate your taking a few minutes to chat with me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much.
That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. Join us again for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe at innovatedisruptordie.com. That's all, folks.